Okay, so today we will study the need for synchronization. Okay. Um, See, we have seen that multiple processes can run on multiple processors. Similarly, multiple threads of a process can also run on multiple processes, right? Or within a processor also, multiple threads and multiple processes can run, solving part of the problems. Okay. Now, when we, different processes or threads solve a problem, combinedly all this solve, okay, then we we get advantage of concurrent programming, or in case there is a parallelism in terms of multiple CPUs, then we get parallel processing. Okay, but it is not as straightforward as what we think. For example, look at this diagram, which will come again. Is that this is how threads propagate. Okay. So then there is no determinism in terms of thread propagation, because it totally depends on how scheduler schedules threads. Okay. All right. So we'll start looking at what are these synchronization primitives, because sometime or other we need to synchronize these threads, otherwise results will totally go wrong because of race conditions and other problems that can happen. Okay. So in real life also we use synchronization. Can anyone give example of synchronization that happens? Just think of real life parallels, because OS and real life scenarios are, you can actually visualize. It helps you in visualization, right? And remember that in OS course we have to visualize. We keep moving between how lower level primitives are implemented by OS and what picture is presented to users, right? So a lot of imagination is required. So think of some place where synchronization is needed.
Production line.
Production line, yes, fine, good. Any you have relay races, right? When the two runners need to synchronize, otherwise will not pass on baton to next person. Okay. Some of you who will do industrial training, you will see that there is a stand-up meeting every morning. If they follow agile, then there's a manager or scrum master or whoever, and then everyone tells what the person has done, because a large project has to split into multiple parts, and these are independently done by programmers, and then they need to synchronize. Okay, so there is a synchronization here. Anything, any big event happens, even in your hostel or something, multiple people are doing multiple things and they need to synchronize. Okay, there's a meeting, a leader will call a meeting and where everyone discuss and we'll have same understanding and move on then. Okay, so this is how it happens in real life too. Okay, so we will see what we can study now in order to synchronize processes and threads. Okay. All right. So far we have studied all this. We have started with the concept of process, then we have moved on to threads. Then we have seen concurrent execution of threads and process require two things: communication and synchronization. And then we have studied shared memory and message passing methods. Right? So this is what we have done. So this kind of gives overall scenario, and then we have studied first communication, these two things, various message passing methods and shared memory method, and now we are getting into synchronization issues, right? Like we will study critical regions, we have done race condition, we studied mutual exclusion, mutexes, semaphores, locks, etc. We are going to study. So this is what we have completed. We have completed pipe, FIFO, that's basically byte stream. And then we have studied message queues, and then we have studied system memory. Now you can go through shared memory POSIX APIs. Is simple. Okay. All right. Now coming to this, we have completed this. Now we have come to synchronization. How various threads can be synchronized. Okay. We will look at some of the concepts like we'll look at locks, mutexes, basically conditional variables, and semaphores. And the Futex is of course Linux way of doing locking. And I will leave it to you to read the remaining if you are interested, but these all are covered in our syllabus. Okay. So now we will start with higher level primitives. Of course, program that you write will use these higher level primitives. Okay, and the ones here, locks, semaphores, monitors, and many other primitives. Okay, and high level programs are going to use this for synchronization between threads and processes. Okay, so now our focus is largely on threads. Note that in case of threads, IPC is very simple. Once threads can communicate with each other with global variables. This is one way, right? Because each thread can see areas, even stacks of other threads. Okay. However, sharing is more complex in case of threads, while IPC is in case of, because IPC processes are, process by itself is secure. So IPC is important there, right? So now our focus is largely on threads, and many of these concepts are applicable as well to processes. Okay, all right. So you will find in POSIX APIs for shared for IPC and synchronization for both process and threads. Okay, all right. So now our focus is here. Next few classes we'll look at higher level APIs, and then we will see that how these higher level APIs are going to be implemented by these mechanisms. All right. Okay. All right. So now we will, in this class today, we will study race condition that can happen in concurrent processes, and then concurrent. We will take two examples today. Okay, and next class also will take another example, interesting example. So you get a feel, what kind of problems which may seem to us that there is no issue, but actually can cause some problems, and results because of concurrent execution could be wrong. Okay, all right. So we know that concurrent execution of program and threads may lead to race condition. And race condition we have studied in the past, right? We have taken example and then see how results, because of mingling of instructions of two processes or two threads, can give wrong results. Okay. Anyone has any doubt or question up to this point? No? All right. Let's look at first example, right? This is a very common producer consumer kind of problem. Okay, so we have here one, suppose it happens in departmental printer, right? If this department printer is there, and anybody can fire a print request. Okay, so basically, and then this printer will have a spooler and connect. Okay, so there's a printer here, and there's a spooler, print spooler here. This kind of mailbox, right? And then anybody can write to this one. Okay, basically some details what needs to be printed, a file, for example, you can say. So there is here there will be many elements. Okay, and or queue you can think of, right? And then this queue will contain basically some slots may be empty, some may be full, but continuously they will be full. For example, these 3 slots are full. It means the 3 jobs are there that have been submitted by different processes, and this spooler will take them one by one and print it. Okay. Of course, there are conditions here that if the spooler directory is full, no process should be able to submit the job. And of course, when the spooler directory is free, then this this printer will not be able to print anything. Is initial condition, right? We know it. Okay, common sense. All right. So now what this now this spooler directory will have 2 variables, right? These are 2 shared variables, in and out, where in points to the next free slot in the directory. Okay, so basically this slot here is free, so in will say that in is equal to, for example, the 0 1 2 3 4. Out points to next file to be printed. So out is going to be used by printer and see what is the next file to be printed. So next, for example, out here will be 1. Okay, so now let's go to next slide. So this is a diagram. So basically there are 3 the slots before this are all empty. Okay, and this slot here 4 5 6 are full. So at this point in time, value of in will be 7. Okay, here this one, it's a free slot. So any process can put its pointer to file in this place. Okay, so all processes will see that free slot is 7th slot, and then this, of course, this printer will see that now it can print the job that's at the top, which is in when out is equal to 4. Okay, so there are 2 variables which are shared. Okay, okay, now let's start with the very simple thing, right? So this is where we are now. Process A reads in is equal to 7. Process A is here, and so so this is a process A, and let's put a process B here. For process A, we'll see in is equal to 7. Okay, and store this thing, because in is a shared variable, so it will put this into some local variable. Here is the next free slot. Okay, next free slot variable in the process A will be 7. All right. Okay, now it's swapped out, or it's a context switched. Okay, we also use the word preempted. So this process A is preempted. Preempted means it has been moved out from CPU before its completion. Okay, so it's a A is preempted and B will come in. Now B will also see in is equal to 7. Okay, it stores this in a local variable next free slot. Okay, and then it it stores its file name in this place, say file 2, for example, or file B. It stores it here, and then change the value of in this variable into it. Okay, note that in is shared variable, so it's visible to everyone. Okay, now what will happen now? It's now process B is now context switched. Okay, now process A comes in, and process A will now see in is, because this at this point it has swapped out, so it will see that slot available is 7. So it will put its file to be printed. Let's assume FA to be printed here. Okay, and changes a slot value, or so this in it changes to it will increase here by 1, so it will become 8. Next free slot becomes 8. It will store 8 here. Okay, so in becomes 8, and its file name that is to be printed goes here. So as a process, as a result, process B will never be printed and nobody will come to know about it because it's a consistent state. Here, whatever is happening is consistent. Nobody will even come to know. Okay. All right. Any question?
Sir, I got a little bit confused. Can you do it again?
Okay. Where is the confusion?
Sir, the thing is that process B reads n is equal to 7.
Yeah.
Okay, and stores in local variable.
Yes.
And, okay. But then it updates its n value equal to 8. That's right.
Yes, it has updated in value is equal to 8.
And then it is context switched. So the process is now process A comes to life, and because it has n is equal to 7, so it also updates n is equal to 8, and
No. Look. So basically, when it was earlier A to B context switch happened when it has stored the next free slot into local variable, which is NFS. Let's assume next free slot, right? It stores there. Now, when the control comes back to it, okay, from context switching after all this happened, okay, the in value it might have changed to 8, doesn't matter. So, but now here A will know that free slot is 7, and then it will put into this slot the file to be printed. So, you will put FA, and then now it will change this to 8. It will increment it, right, in locally. So it increment is local, so it will use this value that's available. Free slot was 7, now free slot becomes 8, and then modified value it will store into in variable. Okay, all right. So where is a doubt now? Now you may be thinking the value of in has become 8, then it should read 8, right? That's one confusion.
yes, sir.
Because so the way you write program is it will from the global variable or shared variable, it will store in local variable for manipulation. Okay, so it is and then when it stores a file name into particular sort, it will change the value by counter become counter +1 and stores that modified value into the shared variable. Okay, so this is the way it is. All right, so this one example how mixing of a context switching happening, which will interleave the instruction of two threads can cause problem, which is very obvious here, right? Okay, so how do you protect it? Any thought?
Sir, increasing the time of context.
Context switching time is not in the hand, sir. It is scheduler that does. You can user process cannot force scheduler to do what user process wants. Okay, so what we'll do is something that we'll study next. Okay, all right. Okay. Before that, let's go into another example of threads. So right now, what is studied is process, basically similar concept. There's no difference, right? Okay. Okay, let's look at very simple code. Okay, so there is a basically we are initializing counter is equal to 0. Counter is a variable, okay, which will increase, which is integer. Okay, and then what you do is that you just run a loop from I is equal to 1 to I equal to 200 million and increase the value of counter, sorry, I, and then increase the value of counter. Okay, simple. So counter is starting from 0. So at the end of it, what will be the value of counter? Note the counter is a variable, right? So it's very simple. It's a 200 million, same as this one, right? Because it's starting with 0 and adding 1. Okay, but the time taken for this is going to be, this is correct answer. Counter will be this one, 200 million. Okay, but it will do so many operations. So how can you do this faster now, assuming that you have 2 cores? Okay, so one simple thing what we can do is that make counter as a shared variable. Okay, and run the same program into threads. Had we had, processes, we would have split this loop into half and half and then would have run. And finally, we'll have to do something. Okay, or we have to define shared memory in case of processor. But let's focus only on thread right now. So counter is a shared variable. And then both these can look at the value of I and increase it. Okay, and check the condition. Okay, so basically same thing can run in parallel in 2 processors. Okay, all right, so these are the 2 processors. So now, okay, what is going to be a speed up here? Anyone?
Two times faster.
कौन बताएगा?
2 times faster.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Ratna? Ratna, are you there? नहीं है. साईं कोमल. Sai, are you there? अभी तो कोई मैच भी नहीं चल रहा है क्या? What are you guys doing now? I can understand if class is at 4 o'clock, then say IPL is going on. Sai Komal, please call me because you called me yesterday. I want to talk to you now. Okay, Ratna, please pass message to Ratna also to call me. Umang?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Umang, what will be speed up?
So, as Ajay said, it will be 2x, but I didn't get it yet.
Basically splitting here, half. Now half will run here and half will run here. Threads will switch, but value of I is, they can always read. Assuming that this is also shared memory. Okay, so in our mind we'll think it's speed up will be twice because half. Let's assume that this thread will work half the time, other thread will run remaining half the time. It will be and it's basically look at the current value of I and increase it by 1 and check this condition, and at the same time increase the counter. So in our mind it is 2. Okay, but this is wrong. Okay, wrong for many reasons. Okay, and second thing is that is result going to be correct? That's also not going to be correct. We'll see how. So first thing is that we have studied Amdahl's law, right? Because we can have a speed up of 2 if task is 100% parallelizable. If the part of task is non-parallelizable, then that will dominate the overall speed up. Okay, if you have 5 friends who have come to home and you ask your mother to cook and she is going to make chapatis, assuming that each guy will eat 4 chapatis, so she will make 20 chapatis and it's all sequential process. But 5 people can eat, together. It will take say 10 minutes. So you can't say that overall process of cooking and eating will take, say whatever time required for each one of them to eat, so maybe 10 minutes. Can't say that, right? So that's Amdahl's law. Okay, so sequential part which cannot be parallelized is very important factor in parallelization. So there are a lot of hidden things that will slow down. Now so this example I have taken primarily because you have done the course of computer architecture. So this is the mental picture we have, P1, P2, and memory we have shared memory containing counter. So one first thread is running here, other thread is running in second one using shared memory, right? So now whether execution is happening here or here, it can happen in parallel, but there is some dependency. The dependency is here, right? We have forgotten there is L1, layer 1 cache, and this shared variable, which is counter, has to bounce off between this one and this one. Okay, so because of policies in policies in cache, right? So so let's assume the counter value is this one is in execution, so counter value is here, counter is equal to 10, for example. Here, so now context switch to this one, second thread comes into play. So now this value of counter, so there is a cache coherence problem. Cache have to be same, right, for same global shared variable. So this value has got to come to here now, only then correctness will be there. So this is called cache coherence problem in general, right? So multiple caches are there, and then we have one value that's being in one cache. When other cache needs it, has to go to the next cache. So all the time cache has to be coherent. Okay, so this bouncing off between L1 caches of the value of counter will slow down things. So that's first things that is not visible. Okay, because we are looking generally at very high level, higher level language, but the moment you split this into machine language and see how it execution happens, then we'll see that there is reasons to for this program to become slow. Okay, all right. Now question is that where is it wrong then? So look at back at the code. So this is the code. Okay, sorry, this is the code. Okay, where is it wrong? Okay, let's okay, so all right. So now you see that what we have looked earlier here is very high level. Okay, this is your C language. Okay, but it has to become machine language, right, or assembly language. Okay, or see, assembly and machine language is one-to-one correspondence. So we'll see it's converted into MIPS equivalent, which is similar to RISC-V. Okay, so counter plus operation now here is load word value of counter, which is a shared memory value, shared memory location. Okay, to T0, register T0, and then increase register T0 by 1. So add I T0 and in T0 and 1, right? So basically add value of 1 to T0, and destination is also T0. Okay, and then store word from T0 to counter. So this we have seen, right, when we did RISC-V programming. Okay, now you intermix. Now what's happening now? Threads are executing this. When we say threads in general, we mean that actually machine instructions are executing. okay, corresponding to high level primitives. Now you see that what happens is, let's assume that first thread 1 on processor 1 execute this. So at the end, and let's assume counter is 0. So counter at the end here becomes 1. Okay, and then processor 2 start execution from here. So it loads the value of counter to T0, increases T0 by 1, and then it stores the value of T0 to counter. So at the end here, the counter value becomes 2. Okay, clear? Any doubt? No? Okay, now what will happen? Let's assume that first thread's first instruction runs, second thread's first instruction runs, then context switch happens. So initially this instruction runs, then context switch happen, and then this instruction runs, then context switch happen, this instruction runs, then context switch happen, this instruction, and so on. So now you can see at the end of all this, the counter has increased only by 1. So if it's initially 0, then you can see that counter 0 goes to T0, so T0 becomes 0 in the first processor. Okay, and then context switch happens, then here also T0 becomes 0. So note that these are register values, these are local, right? And then okay, then T0 becomes 1 in first processor, first thread, and then context switch happens, then here also T0 becomes 1. Okay, and then you load here to counters. So the counter in loading becomes 1, and then you execute this. You'll take this value of T0 and then make counter to be 1. Okay, so now the results is wrong here because of mixing. Okay, you could get it? Anybody who couldn't understand?
Understood it, sir.
Okay. Now I'm asking you question. Now go back to this program. What is the minimum value at the end of this execution because of intermixing? Anybody?
Half of whatever we have, like
Pardon?
half of the 20 million or
Okay. Oh, that's a good number to think of. And anybody else? Can it be different than half?
It should be this number 2 million minimum.
Minimum is what?
2 million.
Hmm?
200. The
Pardon?
number I less than whatever number it is.
I less than whatever number means what? Some number you tell me, na? 0, 1, 2, 5, 6, 10,
200
200?
million.
200, yeah, I mean, it's a random
Like
number
a-
that you have said, right? It's incorrect.
it will depend on how many processes we have, like
Yeah,
that
no,
number
we
divided by
have
number of-
just 2 threads. Okay, and obviously 2 processors, and note that scheduler is not under your control. It can schedule at any time, anyway, not necessarily one after other, right? So we will assume that this scenario, that here first instruction, then second is, that could be one best scenario that can happen, or maybe some scenario. There's a possibility that all these instructions will completed by thread 1, not by anything by this one. This other possibility, first half will go here, second half will go. So any combination is possible, because scheduler can do the job in any way, because not necessarily scheduler is running these 2 threads, maybe hundreds other tasks. So you think of the best case scenario and worst case scenario. So worst case scenario answer is 2. Okay, just the counter value will be 2. and its sequence is given here. Okay. First is counter value is so we load word counter value to 0. So counter is initially, let's assume 0. Okay, counter is 0. And then you increase the value of T0 by 1. Okay, okay, this is not T0 plus, it should be comma 1. So it will be, but the counter value remains 0 because we have not stored the result back to memory, right? So counter value becomes 0, context switch happens, this second thread also starts execution, and then it now here counter is 0 at after addition of 1, counter becomes 1. You know, when store happens, then counter value becomes 1, and this loop is executed 1 million minus 1 times. Okay, so while thread 1 after execution of these two comes out, while thread 2 gets time to execute 1 million minus 1 times this loop, right? Or add I that we are doing. You know, so counter is equal to counter plus plus, right? Okay, so after 1, the value of counter becomes 1 million minus 1, and now context switch happens. Now note that T0, local value of T0 is 1, you know, in this thread. And then when thread starts execution, it stores the value of T0 to counter because it didn't execute the third instruction here. So counter value becomes 1, context switch happens. Now a load word to counter. So now T0 becomes, you know, the counter value is 1 because of counter is a shared variable. The load word basically loads into T0 the counter value of 1. So T0 becomes 1. After add I is equal to 1, counter value becomes 2. Context switch happens. So counter value, okay. So now counter value, sorry, T0 becomes 2, however, counter value remains 1. And now it will run this for 1 million minus 1 times. So counter becomes 1 million. And then context switch happens and it shows the last value of T0 to counter. Okay, so counter becomes 2. So you go through it. I mean, it's a simple, very simple. For your, you know, I mean, I have kind of given you various diagrams to help you in understanding. Any doubt about it? So basically, the intermixing of instructions can give you extreme values, which you can't imagine. And this mixing can happen in, you know, very large number of ways. Okay. And so it's very important to write these programs very properly and make certain operations indivisible. So if we say that if, you know, all instructions corresponding to increment, like, you know, load, add immediately and store is made as a single instruction, this means all three are going to run and none are going to run, then results will be correct. Okay. So now we are going to make certain, you know, if we don't want this kind of mixing, then we are going to make set of instructions as atomic instructions. It means that either all are going to run or none of them is going to run. Okay. So load and store, then load and store, it should be done in single step. Okay. It means that while these three instructions are executed, there can't be interrupt or context switch. So we are, so this area we may declare as a critical region. And then we must protect it by some lock. You say we put a lock here, it means that no other thread can go into this critical area. And then we release a lock here in some sense, right? Or other way is that when these three instructions are in execution, you know, load, add, and then store, then interrupt cannot happen. If interrupt cannot happen, then context switch will not happen. It means that all three can execute. So these are some mechanisms. two mechanisms, right, that we are going to discuss. Okay, all right. So atomic operations is these are indivisible operations that cannot be interleaved or split by any other operation. Okay, so the problem that we have seen happened because add I that we have used earlier was not an atomic operation, because we were looking only at sorry, add, you know, I mean, what I mean to say is that C++, oh sorry, counter plus plus, right? Okay, so that was not atomic. So basically load, then add I and store. These were, all three were not executed together. Okay, any question? So two things we have studied now. First important thing is, you know, at looking at higher level language statements, you can't say that these are, you know, these are going to be executed as a full statement, right? A simple operation as increase of counter or a variable, addition into a variable itself is going to split into multiple instruction, and if they are interleaved, you know, then it can cause problems, right? Okay, so this is what we have seen, that threads can execute in any order. You know, for example, threads, second thread or thread 1, thread 2, thread 3 can start at any point in time, can run it for any point in any length of time, and then get preempted. Okay, and other thread will come in. So, you know, these threads, the order in which these are moves in, moves out, okay, intermingling of that can cause problem if these critical reasons, or until we define synchronization between these threads properly. Okay, so now to achieve correctness with concurrent threads, we need to think of the following. First is that we must understand that a scheduler can schedule threads or run threads in any order. Okay, it means that any thread can be brought in. You know, there are a number of threads waiting to be executed, say T1, T2, up to whatever, Tn. Not necessarily the first thread will be scheduled first. It depends on scheduling algorithm and lot of other factors which threads will be picked up. Okay, and second point is that scheduler can switch at thread at any point, and not necessarily this each time thread will be given same amount of time, and there's a predictability and so on, right? So there are a lot of factors by which scheduler can, or kernel scheduler can decide to preempt the thread. Okay, and this non-determinism can make programming as well as testing extremely difficult. Okay, and this happens only when threads are, you know, cooperate with each other, and for independent threads, nothing, there is no such problem. Okay, because they keep execution independently, and they are independent of each other. All right, any question? So you'll have to design it, you know, when you write concurrent program or multi-threaded program, you'll have to design it properly. Okay. All right, so these are the definitions that we have studied. Synchronization is nothing but coordination among threads and processes. Mutual exclusion, you know, I mean, only ensuring that only one thread or process does a particular thing in time. Okay, at that point in time, no other thread will do, will enter that critical region. So this is something which is shared state or something. So only one process at a time can enter this critical region. Okay, or critical section. Okay, and in order to do that, we can put a lock here, and lock will execute in such a way that only it will allow only one thread or process to enter the critical region. Okay, so when the process comes out, this thread is released, then one of the other thread can grab the lock and enter the critical region, and so on. Okay, so multi-core programming, now you will do in future multi-core programming and multi-threaded programming, because now onwards it's becoming very important to get performance increase by parallel processing. So far people have been not doing anything because the processor speed, we're going year on year on year, right? The processor will become more powerful, clock speeds were increasing, and so on. We have studied that. Okay, now that's all over. Okay, Moore's law is almost coming towards the end. So now we can see that Moore's law is effective by having multiple processors on a chip. Okay, multiple cores. Now we need to exploit these cores, and in order to do that, we'll have to do this program, multi-core program, which is essentially difficult. Okay, so in order to do that, having multiple threads and so on, we'll have to first think of how to divide the activities such that multiple threads can do these activities in parallel. Okay, even this trivial example, we have seen that it can cause so much of problem. Okay, then the balance, it means that threads should be balanced. In some way, all threads should possibly do similar amount of work, because again, scheduler is not in your hand. So the scheduler will schedule these threads one after other or whatever in some way, and the time slot will also be given by scheduler, which is not controlled by user process. So now so the threads have to be balanced for that matter. It means that a thread gets a chance and does very small amount of work, rest of slots remain unused, so not a desirable thing, right? Similarly, the data is to be splitted. For example, in this simple example, we have not splitted the data, and that itself could be cause of problems, right? We could have splitted this data, into such a way that threads can do job much easier, easy way. Okay, then data dependency, we'll have to look for data dependency, because threads have to communicate with each other, right? Okay, so that so synchronization is needed. Of course, testing debugging becomes more difficult. Okay, another 1 minute. See, this concept of synchronization or use of critical resource has been there in our system for very long. So there are two diagrams here, right? It's basically showing the same things. Okay, so in many parts of the country in the past, actually I have traveled with steam engines and so on, where there is only one railway track. Okay, now we can see two parallel tracks, right? So trains can go in either direction, right? One train goes in that direction, other goes in another direction. That happens now. But let's assume that we have just one track. And in parts of India, there are regions there is only one track. So trains can go. So this is part of the critical section, right? Or critical region. We'll use the word critical region here. So if train is going in this direction, then other train cannot come immediately until this train passes through this area, right? Okay, so this isn't there. So what was the mechanism is there? The moment a train that can enter this critical region has got to have a ring. Okay, all right. So from either side, so there is only one ring. Okay, or token we can say. Only if the driver has that token can enter that region. So you can see that as soon as train comes to about to enter the critical section, the station master or some helper passes on a ring, like a ring here to driver enters here, and when it comes out, it hands over the ring to the local guy there, station master or somebody, and now the next train that comes here will grab this token. Only if, let's assume trains arrive early before this train has passed on this section. Then this chain has to wait until it grabs this token, and then some person will hand over the token to this guy, and then this chain can use it. So this has been the mechanism in our system, right? Other mechanism is, of course, you have studied token ring in your LAN course. Okay, the token ring. So this is a mechanism. Okay, of course, nowadays, Ethernet is popular, but so even when I was industry in early 95 or something, 97, then token ring was a mechanism developed by IBM, was very popular. So basically, the station that wants to communicate to any other station has to grab the token, and the token circulates, takes moves here. So first, for example, this has something to send, it will grab the token. Now it can communicate with the packets to anybody. Then it will, when communication is over, release a token will go to next guy. If doesn't have anything, it will let it go, next guy will grab the token, and so on. So this concept in existence for very long, right? So okay, so what did we study today? We know that threading, multi-threading, and multiprocessing are very important concepts. Okay, and because they fit naturally into many problem domains, and also for parallelism, we need to have multiple threads or multiple processes running parallelly and concurrently. Okay, however, it's not as trivial as just schedule or run these threads and processes without taking care of many issues. First thing that needs to be taken care of is synchronization between them, because intermixing of them or running them in any order can cause race conditions, and that will make the results appear wrong. Okay, all right, in order to avoid these race conditions, we need to synchronize these threads or processes, and one mechanism for synchronization is lock, that we'll study possibly in a class following tomorrow's class. Okay, any question? Sorry. समझ में आया?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. All right, so next class we'll look at another interesting problem. That will be a problem from real life. Is given in the book, also is given in Berkeley lecture. Okay, we will, basically two guys go out, two roommates go out to buy milk. Okay, and then we don't want this milk to be bought double, and we also don't want nobody buys milk. Okay, so how to avoid that condition? We'll look at this, and then we'll, from that understanding, then we'll start looking at higher level primitives. Okay, we'll look at the log, we will look at condition variable, we will also study semaphore, and then we'll see how to implement them in hardware, because we need help of hardware. We have dropped a hint that for me, in order to make certain operations atomic, we need to, for example, disable interrupts. Okay, or make hardware run all these three things together, or hardware should have some instructions that will run fully or not run at all. So these are the only way to make operations atomic. All right, okay, thank you, see you tomorrow.